Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. When my two aunts, Evelyn and Margaret, invited me over one humid summer evening, I had no idea what was waiting for me. Their house, a sprawling old Victorian on the outskirts of town, had always carried the scent of nostalgia-dusty furniture, lemon polish, and the faint, sweet perfume of Evelyn's gardenia bush. I had grown up visiting them, always caught between admiration and exasperation. They were magnetic women, impossibly elegant, always in control of every room they entered. And yet, there was something in their eyes that evening in intensity I hadn't noticed before. "Lavra, come in," Evelyn said, her voice soft but commanding. "We need to ask you something. Something important." Margaret, usually so composed, fidgeted with her pearl bracelet, a subtle sign of unease. The two of them exchanged a glance, one that made me feel both welcomed and wary at the same time. "Sit," Margaret said, gesturing to the velvet-upholstered chairs in the sunroom. The room was dim, lit by the amber glow of table lamps and streaks of late-afternoon sun cutting through lace curtains. I obeyed, sensing that this was not going to be a trivial conversation about family gossip or my latest accomplishments. Evelyn took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought she might ask me something mundane. But then she spoke. "Lavra, there's something we've been hiding, something that we should have told you years ago." I laughed nervously. "Hiding from me?" Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "Yes, it's complicated." My pulse quickened. I couldn't imagine what they could be keeping from me. Secrets among family members often involved money, health, or old feuds, but the tension in the air felt different, personal, intimate. Evelyn's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability. "It involves love," she whispered. "Or rather, forbidden love." I blinked, unsure I'd heard correctly. "What do you mean?" Margaret cleared her throat. "Years ago, we were involved with the same man." I froze. The words echoed in my mind. My two aunts, both elegant, married, or at least, I assumed they were entangled in the same affair. It seemed impossible. Evelyn nodded. "We didn't want to tell anyone because it could have destroyed everything. Families, marriages, reputations. We agreed to keep it a secret. We never wanted it to surface. But now you're older. You deserve to know." I struggled to breathe, my head swimming with questions. Who was it?" Margaret's gaze softened, tinged with regret. "Your Uncle David." The name hit me like a physical blow. My Uncle David, the quiet, charismatic man who had been a fixture in family gatherings, the one who had always seemed loyal, devoted, unshakable. The revelation made my stomach twist. He didn't just love one of us?" I whispered, horrified and fascinated at once. Evelyn shook her head. "He loved both of us, in different ways, at different times. But the truth is, it was never just love. There were secrets, betrayals, choices we made that we've carried with us like stones in our pockets. And now, Laura, it's your turn to understand." I felt the air tighten around me. The room, once comforting, now seemed to shrink, suffocating me with the weight of their confessions. Margaret's voice was barely audible. "We didn't want you to grow up thinking your family was perfect, because we're not. And love can be messy, dangerous, and irreversible." The story unfolded, slowly, each detail more shocking than the last. How David had first been drawn to Evelyn. How late-night calls and stolen afternoons had become a secret pattern that neither of them could resist. How Margaret, younger and more impulsive, had fallen for him months later, blind to Evelyn's warnings. And yet, David managed to keep both relationships hidden, threading lies and half-truths with a skill that left me in disbelief. I found myself alternating between fascination and disgust. My aunts, the women I had idolized, were not merely flawed. They were human in the rawest, most complicated sense. And David, the man who had been a family friend, a beloved uncle, with someone who had woven betrayal into the fabric of our lives. Hours passed as they told me every detail, every choice, every tender moment wrapped in guilt and secrecy. The story was intoxicating and terrifying. I had never felt closer to them, nor more distant. Finally, Evelyn reached across the table and took my hand. Lavra, we wanted you to know that love is never simple. People are never simple. And sometimes, even the ones who seem most steadfast can falter. But life goes on. And understanding the truth, even when it's ugly, is part of growing. Margaret nodded, tears glimmering in her eyes. We made mistakes, Lavra, huge ones. But we survived them, and we want you to know you can survive the shadows too. Secrets may hide in every corner, but they don't have to define you. I sat there stunned. The weight of the confession pressed down on me, but with it came a strange sense of liberation. They had trusted me with their darkest truths, and for the first time, I understood the complexity of love, desire, and human frailty. The sun had fully set by the time I left their house. I walked through the garden, the scent of gardenias sharp, in the cool night air. My mind was a storm of images, stolen glances, whispered promises, the fragile, dangerous beauty of forbidden love. That night, lying in my own bed, I realized that the world I thought I knew was full of hidden stories. And my aunts, those pillars of elegance and composure, had taught me something vital. That even the people you think you know best can harbor secrets, and that sometimes the truth is far more complicated than the stories we tell ourselves. I drifted off to sleep, knowing one thing for certain: family, love, betrayal, they were never as simple as they seemed. And some secrets, no matter how deeply buried, had a way of shaping generations. After that summer evening at my aunt's house, I couldn't shake the story from my mind. It lingered in my thoughts like smoke, curling into every corner of my daily life. I found myself recalling every family gathering, every moment with Uncle David, with Evelyn, with Margaret, and suddenly, the memories carried a new, strange weight. Every shared joke, every smile now seemed to have hidden undertones. I started paying attention to the small things I never noticed before: the lingering glances Evelyn and David exchanged at holiday dinners, the way Margaret's laugh sometimes held an edge of tension when David spoke, subtle enough that no outsider would notice. And yet, now I saw it all. Like someone had turned up the contrast on an old photograph. I began visiting Evelyn and Margaret more frequently, ostensibly to catch up, but really to understand their lives, the consequences of the choices they had made. Each visit was a journey into the past, a careful unraveling of tangled emotions. They would sip tea in the drawing room, eyes distant, voices soft as they recounted stories I had never heard before. There were times, Evelyn said one afternoon, when I thought I would lose everything: my marriage, my reputation, even myself, but somehow we survived it. Some days that felt like a miracle. Margaret nodded. David was complicated. But we were young, Lavra. Too young to understand what we were doing. Desire isn't always rational. And sometimes, even when you think you're in control, it controls you instead. I realized how much their past had shaped their present. Margaret, always quick to laugh, carried a quiet melancholy in the lines around her eyes. Evelyn's elegance seemed more armor than style, a shield against the memories she could never fully erase. And I, listening to them, began to understand the cost of secrets, the way they twist, how they linger, how they affect everyone connected to them, whether they know it or not. One evening, as I sat in the sunroom with them, the topic turned to David himself. He loved us both, Evelyn said softly, almost like she feared saying it aloud. But he couldn't give himself fully to either. He was too afraid of losing control, too scared of being caught in the reality of what he'd done. Margaret's hand brushed Evelyn's, and we loved him anyway, despite it all. Sometimes love isn't clean. Sometimes it leaves scars you never forget. The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt the weight of generations pressing on me, the idea that passion, betrayal, and desire were not just isolated events, but threads woven through the very fabric of our family. And I wondered, not for the first time, how much of our present lives were shaped by these hidden histories. As weeks passed, I became more entangled in their world. I discovered old letters tucked into drawers, photographs hidden in albums, and diary entries that revealed the depth of their emotions, the intensity of their fears, and the reckless abandon of their youth. Each discovery was like opening a door to a past I had only glimpsed through family stories and vague recollections. Then, one evening, Margaret pulled me aside. "Lavra, I need to tell you something else," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Something about David that you may not be ready for." I felt a shiver run down my spine. I nodded, urging her to continue. He wasn't faithful to us even after that," she whispered. "There were other women, people we didn't know about. The world you see in front of you, the picture of stability, the perfect family, it was never really like that." The confession hit me like a thunderclap. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of the man I had always considered steady, dependable, with the chaotic, secret-laden life they described. Evelyn, who had been silently listening, added, "Lavra, I'm telling you all of this because the patterns repeat themselves. People we trust, people we love, sometimes they can hurt us in ways we never imagined. And you need to be careful. Love is beautiful, but it can also be dangerous." Her warning felt like both a shield and a prophecy. I realized that their story was more than confession, it was a lesson. A cautionary tale about the fragility of trust, the intoxicating power of desire, and the consequences of choices made in the name of passion. Over time, the story of my aunts and David began to reshape my understanding of relationships, marriage, and loyalty. I watched my own friends, my colleagues, even my partner with a new lens. I noticed the subtle dynamics in their interactions, the way a lingering touch can mean something unspoken, the way a casual glance could carry years of emotion beneath it. And in the quiet moments, when I was alone in my room, I imagined the lives my aunts had lived, the loves they had pursued, and the heartbreaks they had endured. I thought about David too, the man who had captivated both women, whose presence had set in motion a series of events that would reverberate through generations. It was both thrilling and terrifying to realize how much of our lives, even now, were shaped by choices made long before we were aware of them. Secrets, I learned, were living things. They grew, spread, and sometimes demanded to be acknowledged. By the time I was 25, I had woven their stories into my own life, carrying the lessons in my heart. I approached love with both caution and courage, knowing that passion could bring both ecstasy and devastation. And though the truth of that summer evening would haunt me forever, it also gave me clarity that the most important thing in life was to understand the power of the human heart, its capacity for desire, for betrayal, and ultimately for forgiveness. I began to write their story in a journal, carefully documenting every confession, every emotion, every twist of fate that had led to that pivotal summer evening. I wanted to preserve it not as a scandalous tale, but as a testament to the complexity of love, the weight of secrets, and the resilience of the women who had dared to live fully, even in the shadow of betrayal. And so the story continued, unfolding in whispers and memories, and in the quiet understanding that sometimes the most extraordinary truths are hidden behind the most ordinary doors. Weeks after my aunt's confessions, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a precipice. Every conversation, every visit to their house reminded me that the past wasn't gone, it lingered, shaping the present in ways I had never anticipated. I began noticing patterns in my own life, echoes of their experiences reflected in my relationships and choices. One late afternoon, Evelyn invited me to help her sort through a collection of old letters. The envelopes were yellowed with age, some torn along the edges, some sealed carefully with wax stamps. Each letter carried a story, declarations of love, bitter arguments, apologies too late, confessions that could never be spoken aloud. As we read together, Evelyn's voice trembled. "Look at this one," she said, handing me a folded letter. David wrote this to Margaret when he was away on business. He was reckless with his heart, Lara, always chasing desire, even when it meant hurting the people who loved him. I unfolded the paper and read the cursive script, each word a small revelation. His handwriting was elegant, precise, but the sentiments were messy, full of longing and selfishness. My chest tightened. It was as if I was seeing a man I thought I knew, and DID in single quotes T. Margaret, sitting beside us, added quietly, "He loved." Used both, but his love was selfish. He didn't know how to choose, or maybe he was too afraid to admit what he wanted. And in the meantime, we paid the price. The room fell silent. I could feel the weight of decades pressing down, suffocating. In its intensity, I wondered how much of what I experienced in my own life, my trust, my fears, my desires, was influenced by the choices of those who came before me. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself drawn deeper into their world. I began piecing together a complex web of relationships, betrayals, and hidden passions. Every visit to my aunt's house revealed another layer, a secret rendezvous here, a whispered conversation there. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once, like walking through a storm with only fragments of a map to guide me. Then one day, Margaret handed me a small, worn notebook. "This was David's," she said softly. "He kept it hidden for years. He never wanted us to see it, but I think it's time you do." Inside were pages filled with reflections, confessions, and raw emotions. I read about his desires, his regrets, his fears of losing control. I read about the nights he had spent torn between two women, and how each choice had left scars on their hearts and on his own. It was a revelation. A man so outwardly composed could harbor such tumultuous, uncontrolled emotions. Through the letters, the notebook, and the stories, I began to understand something crucial. Love and desire are not always neat. They are messy, consuming, and often contradictory. And the people we think we know best, our parents, our relatives, even our closest friends, carry secrets that shape their decisions and, ultimately, our own lives. But the story wasn't just about the past. It started spilling into my present. I began noticing things in my own life, small acts of infidelity, minor betrayals, moments of desire I didn't fully understand, mirroring the patterns my aunts had described. I realized that human nature rarely changes. It simply repeats, in different forms, in different generations. One night, I confronted them both, seeking clarity. "How did you survive it?" I asked, voice shaking. "How did you live knowing what you knew, carrying secrets that could destroy everything?" Evelyn looked at me, her eyes reflecting years of wisdom and sorrow. "We survived because we had no choice," she said quietly. "And because, in the end, love isn't always about perfection. Sometimes it's about endurance, about finding the strength to carry on despite the pain." Margaret added, "And sometimes it's about forgiveness. Forgiving others for their mistakes, forgiving ourselves for the things we cannot change. That is how we move forward, even when the past threatens to consume us." The words settled over me, heavy and profound. I understood then that the story I had uncovered wasn't just a tale of infidelity and secrecy, it was a testament to resilience, to the human capacity to love despite betrayal, to survive despite loss, and to find meaning in even the most painful experiences. From that moment on, I carried their story with me. I began writing my own reflections, blending the past and the present, documenting the lessons I had learned from my aunts' lives. I wrote about love, desire, betrayal, and forgiveness, not as abstract concepts, but as lived experiences, real and raw. Months passed and I saw changes in myself. I approached relationships with a newfound awareness, understanding that trust is precious, that desire can be both a gift and a danger, and that secrets, once unearthed, have the power to redefine everything. And yet, even with all this knowledge, the past remained a shadow at the edge of my vision. David's presence, his mistakes, and the echoes of my aunt's pain were never far away. They reminded me that the human heart is fragile, that desire is relentless, and that the consequences of our choices ripple outward in ways we cannot always foresee. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the rain fall, I thought about The summer evening that had started at all the moment when my aunt had asked me that strange, cryptic question. "Do you know what secrets people carry?" they had said. At the time, I hadn't, but now I understood. Secrets are living things. They grow, they twist, they demand attention, and they shape the people we become. And sometimes the truths we uncover don't just change our understanding of the path to the revelations from my aunts. Life began to feel like walking on fragile glass. Every visit to their house, every casual conversation, seemed loaded with unspoken meaning. I felt as though I had stepped into a world parallel to my own, a world where love, desire, and betrayal intertwined in ways I could never have imagined. One late afternoon, Evelyn called me over to her study. The room smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, a comforting scent that belied the intensity of what was to come. "Lavra," she said, holding a small wooden box, "there's something I've kept hidden for decades. Something I wasn't ready to share until now." Inside were photographs, letters, and a few mementos carefully wrapped in tissue paper. The photographs captured moments frozen in time. Young couples laughing at seaside resorts, couples in elegant gowns at gala events, and private glances full of longing and secrecy. "These were taken in the years after your grandfather died," Margaret explained softly. "There were affairs, secret relationships, things we didn't know how to confront at the time. But they shaped our lives, and they shaped you, even before you understood it." I ran my fingers over the letters, feeling the edges of the paper. One letter, written in elegant cursive, stood out. It was from a man named Philip, addressed to Evelyn's best friend, expressing love that was forbidden, reckless, and intoxicating. Each word burned with a vulnerability that mirrored the confessions my aunts had made. As I read through the collection, I realized the depth of the betrayals that had been hidden for generations. But I also saw patterns of resilience, moments of courage, and flashes of love that defied social norms and personal fear. It was a revelation. Love and betrayal had been woven into my family's history for as long as anyone could remember. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself increasingly drawn into the aunt's stories. One evening, over tea, Margaret revealed something that stopped me cold. "There's more," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something David left behind, something he thought would never be discovered. It's a child." My heart skipped a beat. A child? Who? Questions collided in my mind, creating a storm of confusion, curiosity, and disbelief. Margaret handed me a faded envelope containing a single photograph of a boy, maybe 12 or 13, with striking features I recognized immediately as David's. "This is your cousin, Laura," she said, her eyes glistening. "He doesn't know the full story yet, none of us do. But he exists, and his life has been shaped by secrets just like ours." The weight of that revelation pressed down on me. A new layer of family history, hidden and fragile, suddenly demanded my attention. I realized that the threads of betrayal, love, and secrecy didn't just vanish, they carried forward, shaping lives in ways no one could control. Determined to understand, I began reaching out quietly. Over months, I pieced together his life, discovering that he had grown up largely without guidance from David, raised by a single mother who never revealed the full truth. There were gaps, misunderstandings, and a quiet resentment toward the family he barely knew. Meanwhile, my relationship with my aunts deepened. Evelyn confided late at night that she had once considered leaving her husband for Philip, but fear and social pressure had kept her in place. Margaret admitted she had secretly loved David in ways that would never be acknowledged publicly. Each revelation felt like a shard of glass, cutting deep, leaving scars, but also eliminating the intricate patterns of human desire, loyalty, and regret. And then came the confrontation. My cousin David's son arrived at the family home unexpectedly one summer evening. His presence was electric, the air tense with anticipation. I watched him meet my aunts, and in their faces, I saw a mixture of fear, relief, and apprehension. "I didn't know who to trust," he said finally, voice steady despite the emotion. "I spent my whole life with fragments, half-truths, I want to understand everything, even if it hurts. Over the next hours, stories tumbled out, apologies, and confessions filling the room like a flood. Secrets long buried were exposed, some bitter, some poignant. And amidst the chaos, I saw something beautiful. The possibility of healing, of connection, even in the wake of deception. The days that followed were a mix of reconciliation and tension. My cousin began visiting regularly, forming a tentative bond with the family he had never known. I noticed how my aunts softened, how their regrets turned into cautious hope. And I realized that love, messy, imperfect, sometimes dangerous, could also lead to redemption, understanding, and a deeper sense of family. Through all of this, I kept thinking about the question my aunts had asked me that summer. What are people hiding? The answer was never simple. People hide fear, desire, mistakes, and love. And those secrets, whether kept out of shame, necessity, or hope, shape every life they touch. As the months turned to years, our family began to heal in small, careful ways. Stories were told, forgiveness was extended, and bonds were rebuilt. Though never perfectly, I carried the lessons of that summer forward, understanding that life is never neat, never simple, but always worth the risk of love, truth, and connection. And sometimes the secrets we uncover aren't just about the past. They are a roadmap to the kind of courage and honesty we must find within ourselves to live fully, to love bravely, and to embrace the complicated beauty of life. They change everything about our present and the choices we will make for the future.